The stories of scandals involving the school privatization movement just seem to grow and grow. But here's one that so far hasn't received as much attention from the Arizona press as it should. Earlier this month, the Arizona Republic had a very small news story about a woman who stole more than $500,000 in private school scholarship funds over several years from a school tuition organization where she worked. She's been indicted with theft and will face a fairly severe penalty. However, what the news stories failed to mention was who was in charge of the organization she worked for, the Arizona School Choice Trust, and who evidently had not put into place very strong safeguards to prevent this type of massive embezzlement. Now, just as a quick reminder, Arizona School Tuition Organizations, or STOs as they're called, receive taxpayer dollars which they then funnel to private schools for scholarships. It is a form of private school vouchers that has been deemed legal by our state Supreme Court, even though it seems to blatantly violate the section of Arizona's Constitution that bans use of public tax dollars on parochial schools. And remember, the legislature has expanded the limits so that individuals can now reallocate more than $10,000 a year of their taxes out of the state's general fund and into these STOs. Corporations can also reallocate thousands of dollars to STOs. So, who runs this particular STO, the Arizona School Choice Trust? Well, would it surprise you to know that it's none other than Clint Bolick, the head of the Goldwater Institute's legal division, one of the driving forces behind school privatization in Arizona? And would it surprise you to know that its treasurer is none other than Tom Jenne, head of Americans for Prosperity for Arizona? Both of these organizations receive funding from the anti-tax, anti-public school, anti-government Koch brothers. So, two individuals whose life work is dedicated to preaching the evils of tax dollars and government waste oversee an operation that allowed a woman to withdraw more than $500,000 in taxpayer funds over several years before anyone noticed. What irony! If a state organization had misused state tax dollars to this extent, you would not hear the end of it from Mr. Bolick or Mr. Jenne. In fact, Mr. Bolick likes to sue government entities that he claims are not using state tax dollars properly. But what will happen to Mr. Bolick and Mr. Jenne for running an organization so carelessly that $529,000 in your state tax dollars just walked away completely unaccounted for, and I'm sure is already spent and not recoverable? Will they have to repay state coffers or come up with other funds to pay all of those scholarships that children did not receive? Of course not. Just to be clear about standard operating procedures for nonprofit organizations like the Arizona School Choice Trust, anyone who is familiar with nonprofits knows that a simple audit would have easily picked up this theft, which escalated year after year when the employee evidently discovered no one was watching. So, the president of the board, Mr. Bolick, and the treasurer, Mr. Jenne, evidently failed to put in place a very simple and very standard safeguard to ensure that embezzlement of state tax dollars did not occur. Again, the irony here is stunning. What's also stunning is that the Arizona press has not reported this connection whatsoever between this STO and the Goldwater Institute and Americans for Prosperity. And Arizona School Choice Trust clearly just wants this issue to go away. This morning on its Facebook page, I posted a copy of the short Arizona Republic article and asked why the proper safeguards had not been put in place. The STO immediately took down my comment and then started screening all comments when others began asking the same question. They didn't allow the comments to show up on the page. I was also blocked from making any future comments on their page. Not exactly a model of transparency or accountability, are they? But where's the press? If a secretary at a public school district had stolen $500,000, where would that story be played in the newspaper? I think we all know, especially if that district were TUSD. it would be all over the front page, and we'd be hearing how our public schools can't be trusted with taxpayer dollars. So why the double standard for these organizations that handle taxpayer dollars? Why aren't there state auditing controls? And why can't legal action be taken against the officers of this organization for not installing better safeguards to prevent this type of theft? These are questions that reporters should be asking. They also should be asking a few more pertinent questions about this organization. For instance, Clint Bolick is the board director, and recently his wife, Shauna, a perennial legislative candidate, was hired onto the staff of this organization as director of business development. Conflict of interest? Nepotism? Sure seems like it. This organization spends more than $750,000 on quote-unquote administrative fees. Yet, on the organization's federal nonprofit 990 filing, it doesn't list having any paid employees or their salaries. Why? The group's website clearly lists 3 employees, and that $731,000 in administrative fees is clearly going somewhere. But the question is, where? And one final question. Why does Arizona School Choice Trust have $4 million sitting in the bank that is undistributed in private school scholarships? If it has collected more than it can disperse, shouldn't it give that money back to the state? Clearly, something is very, very wrong here. But given the power of Clint Bolick and the Goldwater Institute at the state capitol, in addition to his readiness to sue anyone and any organization, I wouldn't count on those questions being answered anytime soon, Dave.
Well, the ironies abound. You have a watchdog organization who can't watch their own nonprofit. It's stunning. And the idea that this group, which is supposed to be responsible for the taxpayer money, is spending $750,000 on who knows what, hiring people who are relatives who may not be. Is a relative the best person you can possibly find, or are they just next door, just close, or in the next room or something? It just doesn't make the Goldwater Institute look good or honest or transparent, and it looks like they're more agenda driven than driven by what they always say, which is the good of the country.
Well, and it just makes you wonder, why are they dabbling in this anyway? All right, this is not part of their mission, except, I suppose school privatization is, but I just wonder to what extent these funds, how are these funds actually being used? We know that they couldn't keep track of, $500,000 of them, and I would really like to see an accounting of that $750,000 that they use for quote-unquote administrative fees. So I do hope the press starts asking those questions. They probably will refuse to answer them, but there are many questions, and maybe they'll come out as part of the criminal case involving this woman.
Well, you gave a wonderful list of questions, and I was listening to the questions you asked, and I thought those are exactly the ones that I would address to Clint Bolick or to other people to try to get answers. And if they don't give answers, then the answer is these people were non-responsive, and that's an answer in itself.
But this is a story that needs to make it onto the front page, not be buried somewhere in the paper.
Absolutely.